This strange story begins at an art exhibition in a welfare institution. The photographer was engrossed in his work. The click-clack of the camera echoed incessantly. After completing most of the work, he curiously asked the director why he suddenly felt inclined to have these artworks photographed. The director simply smiled, saying he wanted to preserve memories as the welfare institution was about to relocate. The photographer's gaze suddenly fell upon a painting of a flower hanging on the wall. The painting was so beautiful and soulful that he couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. It was a paper-folded lily, possessing a quiet, sorrowful beauty in black and white. The director gave a gentle smile, his eyes distant. He said that behind that painting lay a story. The photographer listened attentively, awaiting the revelations to come. Arms crossed, the director began his tale. "This painting has been hanging here for decades, older than I am," he continued, his voice pensive. "I only heard this from the previous director. The owner of this painting was Uncle Kite." Memories flooded back, a fleeting image of Uncle Kite in his twilight years, sitting in a wheelchair surrounded by 3 innocent, playful children. He had lived here since birth, but now he was gone. Looking at the paper lily painting, it seemed to hold countless secrets. The director revealed that there was an unverified legend associated with this painting. The space was enveloped in a mystical bluish-purple hue. A vibrant red lily bloomed on the green grass, and a gentle female voice called out from afar, calling Kite's name. Outside an ancient building, a little girl called out, her clear voice tinged with a pout because young Kite had once again sneaked out to the garden to read alone. Little Nenah, with short hair and a pristine white dress, holding a freshly picked red lily, ran towards young Kite, who was engrossed in reading under a tree, happily showing off the flower she had just picked. Kite looked up, his eyes behind round glasses glinting with surprise and delight as Nenah brought the flower close to his face. The little girl asked Kite if the flower smelled good, her heart full of anticipation. Nenah still held the flower, awaiting an answer. Kite nodded slightly, seemingly still captivated by the beauty of the flower and his friend's smile. Suddenly, a man in a white lab coat, wearing glasses, with a stern expression, appeared at the doorway. It was Dr. White. "This damn brat! Where has she run off to again?" he grumbled. A radiant smile, like the morning sun, bloomed on Nenah's lips. She said that if she recovered from her illness, she would plant many flowers because she loved them very much. A simple dream shone in her clear eyes. Dr. White's eyes flickered with an enigmatic smile, something not entirely friendly. He had spotted Nenah. Nenah, at this moment, was still carefree. Seeing Kite still engrossed in his book, she kept fidgeting and asking if Kite didn't like flowers, unaware that Dr. White's shadow was approaching. Dr. White drew nearer. "Oh, found you?" he said. The 2 children startled and looked towards Dr. White. He bent down, his voice even, saying it was time for Nenah to go back. Dr. White took Nenah's hand and led her away. Nenah obediently followed, though still wondering why she was being taken back earlier than usual today. Kite watched them go, a hint of sadness in his eyes. The red lily Nenah had brought fell onto the grass, lonely and silent. Dr. White's voice, somewhat stern, advised the little girl to smell such things less in the future, reminding her of her lung condition. Nenah turned her head back. Although there was still a trace of regret in her eyes, she flashed a bright smile, bidding Kite farewell, promising to see him tomorrow. Kite stood there, his face tinged with sadness and worry for his friend. He raised his hand in a wave, his voice slightly choked. "A packet of medicine," carefully wrapped in paper and tied with a thin string, lay on Dr. White's desk. Dr. White carefully unwrapped the medicine under the desk lamp, revealing small red pills, and told Nenah this was new medicine obtained from Westerners, specifically for treating her lung disease. Dr. White handed Nenah a red pill. Nenah sat opposite, her eyes shining with joy. She exclaimed her thanks to the doctor. The smile on Dr. White's lips was somewhat cunning as he gently pushed up his glasses. He handed Nenah a glass of water and urged her to take the medicine quickly. The little girl obediently, without suspicion, swallowed the pill. The pills slid down her throat, carrying with them a glimmer of hope. Dr. White's smile grew more enigmatic, as if harboring some scheme. "That's right, drink it up," he repeated, his voice flat. The night was silent, a crescent moon hanging amidst twinkling stars. Lush trees cast shadows, creating a somewhat tranquil scene. Under the dim moonlight, Kite stealthily hid behind a brick wall. He thought everyone must be asleep by now. Suddenly, he saw a dark figure with a very familiar build. Looking closely, he recognized Dr. White. Kite watched in astonishment. In the darkness, Dr. White, in a long coat and black hat, was walking silently. Dr. White's figure gradually disappeared. Kite wondered what he was doing out so late. His gaze fell on the sign, Ward 1. In the sick room, Nenah lay in bed, bundled tightly in a blanket, but her eyes were wide open, restless. She worriedly wondered if the new medicine she took today would be effective. Suddenly, strange noises from outside startled Nenah, mixed with a little fear. Nenah quickly sat up. The sound came from the window. She looked towards the dimly ajar window, silently wondering what the noise was. A small hand unexpectedly reached in from outside the window, slightly frightening Nenah. She was about to scream for help but stopped. But then, a familiar voice called Nenah's name. It was Kite, peeking in through the window. Nenah looked at her friend in surprise and asked why he was here. Kite grinned mischievously, saying he had just stolen some osmanthus honey from his master and brought it over. The scene abruptly shifted to a brightly lit hospital room. In the dead of the silent night, something terrifying seemed to be happening in the room. A man lay motionless on a table, his entire body covered in strange dark purple crystals. Beside him, a blond man with a ponytail. Mr. Peter stared intently, his face disappointed. "Tsk, failed again. Indeed, adult blood still won't do," he muttered. Mr. Peter's face showed clear annoyance. He turned to another person. "Dr. White, have you found a new target yet?" In response to his question was Dr. White's chillingly sinister smile. He confidently replied that he had found one. The girl had taken the medicine, now they just needed to wait for the results. While Mr. Peter looked at the man's crystal-covered body, doubting whether these crystals truly had any value, while a conspiracy was silently unfolding, at the same time, outside Ward 1 were the giggles of two innocent children. Inside the room, Kite had opened the fragrant full jar of honey, making Nenah exclaim with delight. Nenah dipped her finger into the honey jar, then licked her fingertip. The sweetness and aroma of honey spread in her mouth, making her continuously thank her friend Kite. The two children hid behind the bed, happily sharing their innocent joy, unaware of the malicious plot being carried out. While chatting happily, Nenah suddenly remembered something and asked Kite if he was afraid his master would find out he secretly brought her honey. Kite replied that he was scared too. But this was a thank you gift for Nenah giving him flowers. A little punishment wouldn't matter. Hearing this, Nenah felt a little worried. She said to Kite, her words carrying a hint of reproach, "Then why did you still come? If Master catches you, he'll hit your hands." Before Nenah could finish her sentence, Kite quickly turned towards the window, rummaging around. "Almost forgot," he mumbled. A bouquet of vibrant red roses appeared in Kite's hand. He happily presented it to Nenah, saying he had just secretly picked them from outside, the flowers Nenah loved most. Nenah's eyes lit up with surprise and joy. She quickly hugged the bouquet, exclaiming her thanks to Kite. Nenah brought the bouquet to her nose, inhaling the sweet fragrance which made her sigh with pleasure. But the joy didn't last long. She suddenly started coughing. Nenah coughed violently, the coughing growing more intense. The bouquet of roses in her hand fell to the ground, causing Kite, standing beside her, to panic. Kite quickly supported Nenah, calling her name repeatedly. But Nenah kept coughing, her painful coughs echoing in the quiet night. Steady footsteps echoed calmly in the dark corridor without a hint of urgency, as if anticipating what was happening. Dr. White's footsteps approached, not in a white lab coat, but in a long coat and hat. From top to bottom, he was shrouded in a mysterious black. He stopped right in front of Nenah's hospital room door. From inside, Kite's worried voice drifted out. "Nenah, are you okay?" Looking into the room, Kite was supporting the girl, his face pale with fear. It seemed the boy's presence was something he hadn't anticipated. Nenah was still coughing violently, fresh blood trickling from her mouth. Her face was now completely devoid of color. The hospital room door was kicked open. Dr. White stormed in, his face angry and surprised. He looked at the two children and shouted, asking what was happening. A strange sight occurred. In Nenah's palm lay a red, crystal-clear stone. She exclaimed in horror, not understanding why she was coughing up stones. Dr. White's eyes were fixed on the red stones in Nenah's hand. "What is that?" he exclaimed, his eyes wide, greed clearly visible. Kite was now completely frozen, terrified and extremely worried for his friend. He trembled, stammering Dr. White's name. Dr. White turned to look at Kite, his eyes cold and threatening. "Kid, you go back right now, and I can overlook your curfew violation," he growled. Kite was frightened at being discovered sneaking into the hospital room in the middle of the night without permission, but right now, he was more worried about Nenah's condition. Kite looked at Dr. White, fear evident on his face. He wanted to know what was wrong with Nenah. However, Dr. White didn't answer Kite's question. His voice grew annoyed. "I'm the doctor. Don't you trust me?" Nenah looked weakly at Kite, blood still trickling from the corner of her mouth. She tried to gather her strength, her voice trembling as she said she was fine. Kite should go home before he got scolded. Seeing his friend like this, Kite was heartbroken to the point of tears. Though reluctant, Kite had no other choice but to agree, his voice choked with emotion. Kite bowed his head, hot tears falling. Dr. White stood behind him, coldly warning the boy not to let him see him in the hospital room again. He was pushed out of the room by Dr. White. He even muttered under his breath that this kid was truly troublesome, his voice full of bitter annoyance. The hospital room door slammed shut. Outside, Kite stood there, tears streaming down his face, his hands clenched tightly in resentment and helplessness. He gritted his teeth and cursed. Damn it! Once sure, Kite was gone. Inside the room, only Dr. White and the pitiful Nenah remained. He turned back, looking at Nenah. A sinister smile spread across his lips. He muttered something incomprehensible to himself, that now the treatment could proceed. The next day, the sky was still clear blue, the morning sun as warm as ever. Only one thing was unusual. Nenah was nowhere to be seen. Kite sat alone on the familiar stone bench, his heart heavy with anxiety. He had been waiting here since early morning, constantly wondering how Nenah was doing. Suddenly, from afar, Kite saw two figures. It was Dr. White leading Mr. Peter into the garden. Kite quickly hid behind a bush, surprised and curious. This was the first time Kite had seen Mr. Peter here. He couldn't help but wonder who this person was that Dr. White greeted so enthusiastically. Kite's face showed clear bewilderment and many questions. His intuition told him something bad was happening. The boy decided to silently follow them. They stopped in front of Nenah's hospital room. Kite hid behind a nearby wall and overheard the terrifying conversation between the two men. Mr. Peter pressed Dr. White, asking if he was sure of success. Dr. White smiled smugly, affirming with certainty. He even said Nenah was lying motionless in bed like a dead person, but her body had resisted decay. Mr. Peter appeared extremely excited, wanting to go inside quickly to see. After many failed experiments, if this time was successful, it would indeed be a joyous occasion. Dr. White then opened the hospital room door, politely inviting Mr. Peter inside. Kite pressed himself against the wall as if afraid of being discovered, his heart pounding. Their figures gradually disappeared behind the door. The more Kite heard of their conversation, the more terrified he felt. They were definitely carrying out some dark conspiracy. When he was sure they had entered the room, Kite summoned all his courage and stealthily crept closer to the door. His worry for Nenah gave him the courage to find out what they were doing. Kite reached the door, peeking inside through a small crack, trying to assess the situation. He heard Dr. White's voice inviting Mr. Peter to see Nenah's condition. The reply was a low, satisfied sound. "Excellent. Indeed, children must be used. Adults at this stage would directly decompose." Nenah lay motionless on the bed, her mouth taped shut, hands and feet tightly bound. Her entire body was covered in glowing red crystals, sparkling eerily. She let out a weak, desperate cry. Seeing the scene before him through the crack, Kite exclaimed in horror, "Oh my God!" The boy had never faced such indescribable emotions, both panicked and unsure what to do in this situation. Inside, Mr. Peter had put on a mask, preparing for surgery. Dr. White turned to ask him how many crystals he would take today. His answer stunned even Dr. White. "Take them all," Mr. Peter ordered coldly. Nenah lay there, tears streaming, her small body covered by the deadly crystals. She was still conscious, and that consciousness made her more terrified than ever. While Dr. White was still pondering that there were only so many crystals on the girl, and if they took them all, what would they do later? Mr. Peter put on gloves, holding a sharp scalpel. He cruelly said these crystals were enough to spend for 8 lifetimes. Draining her blood now and letting it recrystallize would be the same. Standing outside, Kite panicked, his hands clenched into fists. Nenah was in danger, but he couldn't fight 2 adults. Nenah looked at the 2 men with eyes full of extreme panic. She knew she had no hope of survival. Mr. Peter raised the scalpel. He looked at Dr. White and advised him to wear a mask and gloves if he wanted to live, not to let blood splatter on his skin during surgery. Dr. White sneered, telling Peter to worry about himself. With his experience, he knew what to do to protect himself. Hearing this, Mr. Peter hesitated no longer. He pressed the cold, sharp tip of the knife to Nenah's neck, making the little girl scream in pain as the blade touched her flesh. At this point, Kite, standing outside, could bear it no longer. Regardless of the danger, he kicked open the door and rushed in, shouting, "Stop what you're doing!" Dr. White and Mr. Peter startled and turned around. Before they could realize what was happening, Kite had lunged forward, using all his strength to push Mr. Peter's knife-wielding hand. Caught by surprise, Mr. Peter couldn't react in time. The scalpel was instantly knocked out of his hand. He roared in anger. But fate decreed that the sharp knife accidentally fell right next to Nenah's bound hand. Nenah saw the knife within her reach. A glimmer of hope suddenly flickered. A reckless thought flashed through her mind. With a boy's strength, the push just now didn't faze Mr. Peter. He immediately grabbed Kite by the neck, his face full of rage. Dr. White also rushed over, grabbed Kite, and lifted him up. Kite struggled, shouting incessantly, "Nenah, run!" "You two bastards! How dare you harm Nenah like this?" Kite roared in indignation. Meanwhile, Nenah had reached the knife and was secretly cutting her bonds. While the two men's attention was focused on Kite, Nenah successfully cut her restraints. She was overjoyed to the point of tears. But now the most important thing was to save herself and her friend. Mr. Peter removed his mask, looking at Kite with a scornful expression, mocking him for being so small, yet daring to be a hero. Suddenly, Nenah lunged straight at Mr. Peter. With a knife in hand, she rushed towards him and with all her might tried to stab him. He was taken by surprise, but still managed to react. A little girl's strength was too easy to deal with. Quick as lightning, he grabbed Nenah by the neck, roaring, "Trying to stab me sneakily, huh?" Kite screamed Nenah's name in horror, trying to break free from Dr. White's grip. "Damn it! If you scream again, I'll kill both of you today." Dr. White, furious, threw Kite violently to the ground. In that chaotic moment, Nenah, though in pain and despair, gave a crazed smile, her hand still clutching the bloody knife. "You people seem very afraid of my blood?" Nenah looked straight at the two perpetrators, her voice weak but full of defiance. Mr. Peter still didn't understand what Nenah intended to do. He looked at Nenah with confused eyes, then, as if realizing something, he stammered, advising Nenah not to be foolish. Dr. White was also terrified, his eyes wide. He couldn't understand where such a small girl found the courage to be so resilient. A dry, cracking sound was heard. Nenah cried out in pain. Her blood, carrying tiny crystal fragments, splattered onto Mr. Peter. Nenah's blood seemed to possess a demonic power. The places on his body touched by the blood began to bubble, and then strange dark purple crystals rapidly grew, piercing through his flesh, causing him to let out a horrifying, agonizing scream. Returning to the present, the director looked at the photographer, his voice heavy with sadness, saying that Nenah didn't die from lung disease, but from the greed of adults. The two men pensively looked at the paper lily painting. The director continued, saying that on the day Nenah was buried, a flower like this bloomed before her grave. Later, young Kite, who became Uncle Kite, lived out his life in this welfare institution, as if to live with the beautiful memories of his childhood friend. Before a simple grave, the epitaph read, "Nenah's grave." A red lily was placed respectfully upon it. An old man's voice, weak but full of affection, sounded, "Nenah, I've come to visit you." It was Uncle Kite, now old and frail, sitting in a wheelchair, silently gazing at the grave of his childhood friend. Time had passed, a very long time, but the mornings with vibrant flowers and Nenah's sun-like smile would forever remain here and in his heart.